It is therefore my pleasure to ask you to help me to welcome on stage and to do his presentation the President of the Caribbean Maritime University, Professor Andrew Spencer. Help me welcome Professor.
Indeed, indeed. I got a little nervous earlier when Mr. Karcher was introducing Prof. Williams and said he was formerly principal of UWI, and he paused. I said, does he know something we don't know then? And then he went on to say Five Islands. I'm happy to be here this morning, and as I get into this presentation, well, first of all, I wondered why I was asked to present on finances and financial stability. And at first I thought it was because I'm chairing a board known as the National Insurance Fund, which is all of us contribute to NIS and we invest it. And then I thought it was because I chair the National Education Trust, which is in the Ministry of Education, which is again donor-funded agency. And then after the PS spoke, I recognized that it's simply because CMU is the institution that calls the ministry the least to ask for money. And so they assume that we're clearly managing our funds, right? I'm here today with some very important people from the CMU who ensure that we do what we're supposed to do. And I want us to ask a few questions this morning as I go into this presentation. The first question really is, can an institution cut its way to financial sustainability? I want us to think about that. Can you cut your way to financial sustainability? You don't have to answer it now. It's rhetorical for the moment. Can it increase tuition forever? Again, rhetorical. Do I hear you shouting some responses? Can it depend indefinitely on government subventions? Or does long-term financial sustainability demand something fundamentally different from what we've been accustomed to doing? And I believe that as I hear all the no's for the first three questions and then the yes for the fourth question, I'm going to have a very supportive audience today as we look at the realities facing higher education in terms of finances. So the first thing is that there are declining public resources. Resources are diminishing at a rapid pace for a number of reasons, and the allocation to tertiary education is decreasing. And there are reasons for that. Obviously, at different stages of policy and government, you will have shifting focus on what needs to be the priority of the day. And in a developing country context, the PS said it herself, in a developing country context where resources are extremely limited, something has to give if another has to get. But I want to put something against that in juxtaposition. So while the resources are diminishing, the stakeholder expectations are increasing. Every day people are demanding more from us. Every day people want more from us. Operating costs are also, there we go. Let me just give it a chance to catch up. Is there a clicker or is somebody going to? All right, so I just point when I want the next slide, all right. So we are at slide 3, sir. All right, we're not there yet. Let's keep going. So while we are having less resources available to us because the scarcity is increasing, people want more from higher education institutions, and you hear the statements in the public space all the time. Also, there's greater accountability, and the technological change is happening at a pace that is leaving us all behind because we don't have enough money to resource our technological capabilities. Dr. Brown and I talk about this all the time. He says that, well, he was doing STEM before STEM was sexy. And I tell him, well, we've been doing STEM a very long time too, but we don't see STEM as our substance, we see it as our propellant. We do nothing without the innovative approaches that come out of STEM. So long and short of it, my friends, is that higher education institutions are expected to deliver more with far less resources. That's the fundamental truth that we face. All right, we're good now? It's in presenter mode, so you need not preempt me. Ah, there we go, nice and big. All right, so I'm gonna stop looking at this one as well. Next, so these are the realities facing us. Now look at Jamaica's situation, and I am not here, because I want to dispense with this very quickly. I want to get rid of this conversation about we're not getting enough We can all agree. Can I get amen? We're not getting enough, right? We don't have ideal circumstances to do all that we need to do. So I'm going to deal with this very quickly and then make a separate kind of conversation emerge. So national budget, look at this. National budget of Jamaica, according to the latest data we have. Allocation to education in relation to that. Now, we saw the announcements yesterday, which were good announcements in terms of the improvement in all of the areas of education. I don't believe I saw tertiary yesterday, but I'm sure that's coming, right? Dr. Brown was looking, and he did not see it, and he did not hear it. And then if you move a step further to the allocation for tertiary institutions, the challenge is obviously a great one. But we are expected to compete at the highest levels in terms of the product that emerges from our institutions. So we are producing students, graduates, who are to compete against the best in the world with the most limited resources while attempting to do that. That's just the picture I wanted to paint so that you don't think I'm ignoring the fact that we're not getting enough. However, the data is telling us some things. It's telling us that, well, we don't have enough, and I don't think we'll ever have enough to do what we need to do. But fundamentally, my friends, leadership will determine what we become. Is financial sustainability an accounting challenge or a leadership challenge? Both things can be true. But the question really is there an opportunity for leadership intervention in the face of financial challenges to ensure that you're managing your affairs in a very seamless way? So here's the argument, and this is the thesis today. And we're going to follow this right through. Our simple approach where we work, and I have my Vice President of Finance here, I have my Vice President of Academics here, and I have my Registrar here. All of the people who help to make sure that this happens. We need to start having a performance conversation, and I know it's a difficult thing to ask tertiary institutions to start having this conversation because we've been cultured to say that the academy, the academe, the higher education space is sacrosanct, and there's a certain freedom. We talk about academic freedoms, and we're able to be unencumbered in what we do, and therefore we should be allowed to simply spread our wings as we feel to. The challenge here is that most of the times when we talk about this, it is not within the frame of performance. How are we contributing to the national space that we serve in a very clearly measured way? How does that then feed into trust and reputation? And I'm going to give you examples for how this has actually worked for us at the CMU. All of these things, if you perform, chances are people start believing in the brands more. Belief in the brand means that more potential students start to pay attention. And I pause here just to say, when I got to the CMU, I said to the leadership team, student numbers, first-year student numbers are in the pits. Now, there are two reasons why that happened. We had two back-to-back crises. The first crisis I do not need to name because you know what it was. The second crisis, which came about a year and a half later, was the crisis of COVID. And so we had those two things back to back. First year numbers were down probably 110%. That's where we're coming from. And so my concern wasn't so much the overall student number, but what that meant for as you matriculate and as you progress. If that's what you're taking in each year, then obviously overall student numbers over 4 years will be significantly deteriorated by the time you get to year 3. So I started focusing on this. What did we do? I said to the team, we're not chasing the numbers. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep going into secondary schools. We're going in at grade 9 so people can know us before they have made up their minds for 4th form. We're going to do all of those things, but we're not chasing the numbers. Let's rebuild the brand. And I was greeted with the same kind of silence. What? Let's rebuild the brand and watch the numbers follow the positive image. And so said, so done, my friends. Within 2 years, we saw the first year student numbers go up by 43%. The year after that, it went up by an additional 24%, and then it went up by another 13%. Now we're seeing it trending like it's going back to a 40% increase. All of that because we were not obsessed with the numbers. I made the point about performance, trust, brand reputation, and what that all means. Again, as a part of this whole process, the research excellence is important, and the student demand, or the lady is speaking while I'm speaking as well. I thought it was just for Professor Williams' introduction. She spoke twice while Mr. Korcher was introducing him. I thought it was an endorsement of the good professor. All right, so research excellence is always going to be a part of this, and I'm very surprised that my friend Albert is saying he doesn't know what to do with research money. I'm going to have a conversation with him after this, and he can find a way, if Dr. Benjamin and crew will allow him to fire some of that to us. Strategic partnerships. This is a hallmark of how we are able to diversify the resource base. And I'll say a little bit more about that a little later on. Investment and funding. Many of us, and I suspect Prof. Williams will talk about this, have had to find very creative ways of engaging the private sector to be able to do some of the things that we need to do. A part of that is going to enable us to think outside of the box and to say the government is simply not doing enough. So if we can agree that there's not enough and rest that here while we still articulate and agitate for more, then we still need to talk about whether we're doing the best with what we actually have. Next slide. All right, so a number of things, and I know this is not new to you, but we're trying to make the thing congeal. I believe there's a triad that's going to enable institutions to be able to talk about long-term financial sustainability. At the heart of all of that is the people. And I've said that performance is key, and a large part of whether we perform well or not is going to come down to how well we can get the people to pull in one direction. We waste a lot of money dealing with divergent interests. We waste a lot of money dealing with peripheral motives. We waste a lot of money dealing with, I think I heard somebody say a while ago, pettiness. Yeah, and a lot of the pettiness doesn't require petty cash, it requires more than that. So we waste a lot of our already limited resources going in many directions with tentacles everywhere because there are just too many things happening. And so the people are going to be important if we are to be financially sustainable. Again, what the people do will determine how much time you have to spend or how much money you have to spend doing cleanup as well. The systems. Mr. Campbell pointed to the systems. I've often said that any leader who doesn't define or create a system that can survive without him or her is doing wrong audience. I was going to use another word before poor job, but I'm sure you can imagine the other P word before poor job. He's doing a really bad job if you're not creating a system that can survive without you. I tell my team all the time, if I walk tomorrow and the CMU crumbles, then I have failed. Fundamentally important. And so the financial systems are so critical. Something is active in the media now, so I won't say too much about it, but just to say that it was our systematized approach that enabled us to be able to catch something early. We will never always get the people element right, because even when you are able to get the masses to pull in the right direction, you will have an outlier who decides that he or she is smarter than a system. And so when the media calls me, I said to them, I can't dictate one single individual's action. What I can do is put systems in place for early detection. I can put systems in place to ensure that the likelihood of miscreant behavior is minimized. And so this is how the people and the systems have to work together. And of course, how are you maximizing resources? We're going to say some things this morning that, some of them, if you're a preacher, you know that some of the things they say go and get the amen. And the other ones, you know that the church will be silent, right? We may have a few of those moments this morning. Next slide, please. So pillar one, the people. Strategic stewardship is so critical in this day and age. Many of us in this room are heads of institutions. I mean, you're number one in your organization. But while being number one in your organization, sometimes you're a little too elbow deep in some of the operational components of your organization, financially and otherwise. I hear the amen for that one. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't trust our teams for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes we inherited the team and we just don't think the team has the depth to handle some kinds of things. Sometimes we're just naturally micromanagers. But the reality is that the strategic stewardship is going to have to be surrounding how we develop individuals who are going to enable us to be at the top of our games in the core areas of our business. If the core areas of our business are being slighted because we are too deep in the ops so that we can't be strategic, then we're going to have a challenge. The PS said something earlier which is similar to what I say to my team at the CMU. She said, you are here to guide her. You are the experts in your spaces. I've often said to my team, maybe a little crudely, that if I have to advise you on your portfolio, then I don't need you. I don't need you. The good thing is that the three vice presidents in this room, I need all of them. They give excellent expert advice. That's the reality. So you need to be able to be clear-eyed, perched where you ought to be perched so that you can see the picture that others can't see because they are in their particular silos or areas of smaller domains dealing with what they're dealing with. So it has to be that there's consistency in your teaching, your research, your innovation, your governance, and of course, student success, which is now a buzzword in higher education. Everybody's talking about student success, and before we never used to say that. I don't think there's anybody now who's not saying student success, student success, student success. Now why is that important? Because where that exists at a particular level, there's something that is birthed out of that. Your reputation, the same thing we're talking about, that's going to attract the funding, that's going to attract everything else, that is inherently buried in student success. And so we need to excavate, unearth, and make that key. Back to this conversation about performance. And so, resource and prioritization. Can we talk about priorities for a minute this morning? The pursuit of financial sustainability asks, how do we secure more resources? And don't get it wrong. Prof. Williams, Dr. Brown, and myself, we go down to the Ministry of Finance all the time and have meetings to ensure that we're not left with a basket with holes in it. And so that's an important part. The strategic stewardship approach, which I'm trying to espouse this morning, says, how do we optimize, how do we ensure that every single dollar that we already have is getting us the mileage that it should? That kind of acute focus is going to be important, even more so now, because I suspect that this conversation about limited resources is not going away anytime soon. Are we able to properly account for every single dollar that we are receiving? And are we able to speak to the impact and the return on each of those dollars? So what I'm championing here is a private sector outlook in the higher education space. Because you are all transformational leaders, and transformational leaders, really, you have to consistently make decisions and choices that will always strengthen your enduring value. So here's what I don't submit to. I know there's a thought sometimes that the government needs to just get it. They need to just get it. We're the most important people in the country, and I agree, I believe. They need to just get it. Therefore, they need to just give us more. I think the other side of that coin is, am I demonstrating my enduring value? That enduring value is not only so that you can ask for greater subvention. That enduring value is so that you are naturally attractive to those who have the money. In the last 3 months, something interesting happened. I was trying to decide what I'm doing with my future, and then some exciting things happened, and I said, maybe we don't need to decide anything about any future. The now is looking okay. I got some calls from some serious players in shipping, logistics, and port management who said, here's what we want to do. We love what is happening in that space. You know what we want to do? We want to identify your brightest students at year 2. And when we identify those students at year 2, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take them under our program. We're going to give them full tuition from years 2 to 4. Every summer, they have to come to us to be indoctrinated in our way of doing business, right? But their tuition is paid. They finish at year 4. They give us 3 years of their lives bonded, and then they can do whatever they want to do. Everybody wins. I get my tuition. The students don't have any pressure. The company gets people who are coming in ready to hit the ground because they've been going to them in the summers, and that is only because somebody looked and said, I like what you're doing. The brand is appealing to me. And so the enduring value is going to be an important part of how we shift our focus. Next slide. So we have some dilemmas. Here's a challenge, and I think it's the biggest one. Many of us look at whether our institutions are doing well based on how many programs we're offering. Nobody in this room, right? There are those who are of the impression that if you're not pushing out a new program, if you're not doing this, if you're not doing that, then somehow you're not serving your nation. Well, many times the reverse is actually true. The reverse is actually true. Many of us are doing multiple things that, one, we ought not in the first place to be doing, and 2, we don't have the capacity to do it. Law of diminishing returns, my friend says here. And those returns are diminishing compounded. So as they're diminishing compounded over a decade, 2 decades, you are ending up in a negative quantity, a minus quantity, trying to figure out how to keep doing more of the same things. Again, let's make this very clear. I know many of you have these systems, and these systems are critical. Every single new program has to demonstrate how that new program will sustain itself. I've gone further. I've gone much further. I've said to the team, it must not only show how it can sustain itself, because I understand that education is a public good and therefore not everything will make a profit. But the way I'm able to take care of the people and the staff is if I'm actually generating a surplus. So the program must not only show how it will self-sustain or break even, the program must demonstrate how it will create a surplus. And that has served so well that we have not offered a single new program in the last 4 years at the CBU. Except, and Dr. Benjamin says good, so she may not be happy to hear that we're starting 2 new programs in September. But these have gone through that process that we have talked about. These programs are not going to require us to ask for a single additional dollar from the government of Jamaica. Not $1. And so I'm making the point that expanding programs have a number of things that come with them, and people don't think about all these things. Can I share trade secrets, Registrar? You'll give me permission as the owner of the records? I'm just going to say this one thing. We have a very exciting program at our university called, well, it's in a center called the Center for Security, Counterterrorism, and Non-Proliferation. When I walked in, the first thing I heard was that this program is the best program. It creates the most money for the institution. And it's not completely untrue. But the quantum I was being told was making my mind spin, so I needed to look a little closer. When I looked at it, you know what was actually happening? And it happens to all of us. People were looking at, so I don't know any balance sheet that only has one side. So the people were telling me that the program was making me hundreds of millions of dollars. And I said, but what's it costing me? Nobody knew, because the costs were being absorbed and conflated with everything else that was happening in the general pool of. I said, no man, pull this out. I need to have the real picture of the net impact of this particular set of programs. No, thankfully, they still came out on the positive side of things, but certainly not to the extent we were being told. And so we need to be able to know these things. So it comes with a lot of things. It comes with the fact that we're now in a digital age and you're going to have to account for that. It comes with the need to support your students, because again, you're expanding at a particular pace. You're starting a new program, you're taking in 250 new students, but you still have the one student services officer. And then by the time you catch up and realize 4 years later that you need 2 student services officer, you go to the ministry and say, we can't keep doing this. We only have 1 student services officer, we need 3. Wrong time that's coming up. That should have come up at the point where the new program was coming into play. So you have a whole heap of things that come out of that. You are not able to meet your quality proposition because you're going to have the student experience declining. Nobody has anyone to talk to. And then you start seeing emails flying over to MOEYSYEWQ. And of course, your institutional effectiveness is challenged. And you continue to have to tighten and tighten and tighten until you're simply just existing. I like changing my own slides, because when I change my own slides, I prompt myself to go faster. Now, if you are expanding your program without thinking carefully about the capacity stewardship, I want you to look at the kinds of questions you have to ask. And you have to have a reasonable answer. Which initiatives advance our mission? Back to the mission. Stay on mission, stay on message. We have a very simple approach at CMU, which says, we wrote our SGI plan together, that's our strategic plan. Anything that falls outside of the walls of that plan, do not even bring it to us. It's not that we're not being agile and nimble, it's that we are committed to the particular cycle. And so when somebody, including the president, wakes up with a very bright idea one morning because his coffee tasted particularly great, and he runs to the team and he says, we need to do this. The team then cautions the president, but what part of the strat plan does this connect to? No, the president is very crafty, so he'll probably find a way to connect it one way or the other, right? But the reality is that those are the conversations we have. How does this fit what we said we needed to do at our core? If it does not fit, we will not do it. It's as simple as that. So, which initiatives generate measurable value? Not just things that we measure based on our own standards. Measurable value that can stand up to reliability and validity, and those of us who do the research thing understand. Anybody should be able to test the thing and see that what you're doing is actually adding value. What activities consume resources without meaningful impact? And I'm sure, can we identify a few? Don't tell us. Just think about some of the things we're doing that use up money and the impact is not commensurate to the spend. I think that's how we have to start thinking. These are the things that keep me up at night. That thing we spent on yesterday, is it going to be worth it in the end? What should we discontinue? This is the toughest one. Nobody likes to stop anything. We've been doing it for a while, and we see that it has this particular reaction. Some of the reactions are purely visceral. Feels good. Feels good. I don't want to give a certain tourism example because I may then end up on the other side of this room with your wrath, because a lot of us are still sentimentally attached to it. Well, maybe I should. I hope JS will be kind to me. In my tourism days, because that's my background, I always made the point that we could benefit from not spending hundreds of millions of US dollars on a failing airline. And my mother cursed me for it because she liked to see the pretty bird in the air. And you feel good when you go upon it. And you get good food. And it's this. And it's the safest airline. They've never yet crashed. And I kept saying, viscerally, and also for those who think about sovereignty and the statement it makes for sovereignty. I said, viscerally, this thing is great. But if you're very cerebral about this, does it make sense for a country that cannot pay its teachers right to keep doing something because it feels good? I'll leave that one alone and hope that I can still have coffee with you afterwards. What should we discontinue? A serious question. Next slide, please. So we have to start saying no to some things. What should we say no to and what should we say yes to? I want you to leave with tangibles today that can get you to go back to your teams and say, Look, I know this may be uncomfortable, but we're going to say no to chasing every single trendy thing that we see happening. Not because AI is hot, everybody must have an AI degree. And I don't want you to judge me because we have an AI degree. But we had it before AI was, to use Dr. Brown's word, sexy. Not because something appeals to a particular minority should we do it. The other thing about industry partnerships is that we are very judicious about who we partner with. We don't partner with everybody. So not because you say you want to partner with us, we should partner with you because it looks good. We have two things that guide us with partnerships. One, how will the partnership serve our core mandate? Two, can we serve the partnership? Because again, higher education institutions have to get out of this space where we think we're the weaker party in negotiations and conversations. When I talk to the private sector, I'm talking to a private sector CEO like I'm a private sector CEO. I am bringing value, you are bringing value, we're creating symbiosis, and we're going to move this thing forward. So if I can't bring value, I'm not going to partner with you. The other thing is, industry partnerships take up a lot of your time. If they're not serving your mandate, that is not a good way to be using up your time. So we're not doing this checkbox industry partnership arrangement. When my new council came in and I arrived, we saw about 120 MOUs on the table. So how many of these are serving us? Came out a lot of those. We restarted the process. We're now at about 27 active MOUs. And I've told them if it's not going to be an MOU, we're not going to do it. No more MOUs. It has to be an MOU. It has to be something. In fact, how we're approaching it now is we want to see fruit of the partnership before we even sign. And we've been getting that happening. So people who are doing things with our students, we do those things and then we ink because we're seeing evidence. So when we sit at the table, Mr. Korcher, to sign the MOU, we're talking about one thing we've done together. Evidence that there can be some movement. Standardized one size fits all student retention metrics. Say no to that. Understand your own domain, understand your own context, and be true to your context. Be unashamed about being focused on what you are to do. So it's not that you can't expand. I want to be clear. What do I say to the team? And the team agrees with me. We know our lane. Our lane is maritime, shipping, ports, cyber, and everything to do with security at ports, etc. There are ways to expand your lane so the lane becomes a highway, even a freeway, or if you're British, it becomes a motorway without coming outside of that space. So we're looking at some things now. For example, we're dabbling in the transportation space because transportation is still our baby. And so we're having conversations related to that. So there are ways to expand but still remain true to what your mission and your mandate is. All right, so all of us have this, don't it? The passive multi-year strategic plans where every year you assess it and you just roll one thing over into the next year. All right, so okay, how many of these things did we accomplish? None. But we simply roll it to the next year, and then the new 5-year process starts, and we keep kicking and rolling and kicking and rolling. Well, here's how I see it. If there's any item in your strat plan that has to keep moving, if you can find something that has missed 2 cycles, probably you should drop it. If there's one item that you have to kick twice, despite your best efforts, and your best resource mobilization, and maybe, just maybe, that thing is pie in the sky aspirational and not realistic for you. Or maybe you need to do things significantly differently. This isolated, siloed innovation hub. So I have to be careful how I say this now, because we're setting up all kind of labs all over the place. And I'm the chairman of NET, which is setting up labs too. But I've always said that when we decide to be innovative, let's understand how that innovation fits into our broader ecosystem. We don't want to have a standalone thing that we're doing just because it looks exciting and makes a statement to the world about what we are doing in innovation. It must be a part of an architecture that makes sense, that serves us, and that allows us to serve better. If it doesn't check those boxes, then that doesn't make sense. And so the other side of it is really you need to be saying yes to the things that are agile. You need to have your rolling plans, that are action plans, that are purpose-driven, that are driving holistic student success. Your innovation systems must be integrated, and of course, invest in your human capital appropriately. Next slide. So the keys: consistency, transparency, accountability, efficiency, and knowledge retention. Stop having people in your organizations who are there for 30 years, who are hogging up institutional knowledge that only their desk can understand, and when they leave you, you have serious problems. There's a financial cost to that. Seriously. This is a financial conversation we're having. We must be able to institutionalize. I can't give that example. I went to a place one time where I was leading the place, and there was only one person who knew how to do one thing. I said, this is crazy. I asked the person for some information. They asked the person for the information, and the person said they couldn't share with another line manager. So you can't share. So, of course, the CEO's office asked for it. I sent it to everyone. I called the individual and I said, these 3 people are going to shadow you for 3 months. And you're going to teach them everything you know. And you're not able to hold back anything from them because they're going to be measures of whether they know. And if they don't know, they're going to have to spend another 3 months with you. I know you don't like have people breathing down your neck. So again, there's a cost to all of that. Knowledge retention is important. Next slide. And I'm wrapping, I promise you. The third pillar, and probably most important, how the systems pull together all of it. Why do you need them to interact so well? Well, of course, if you have smart people around you, they're creative, right? They're ideators, and you'll get great ideas. And you have to know your people. This is the financial conversation too. You have to know your people. You can't empower somebody to do something that will cost you inordinately if they don't know what they're doing. So you have people who come up with great ideas. One idea every 3 minutes. You met anybody like that? Exciting, but they don't finish anything. And then you have the other people who can't create a single idea. They can only do what you tell them to do, but they definitely carry it over the finish line. Understanding that space with the people is going to be important for you to be able to solve your problems sufficiently. But look at the connection. So, if you have the people with the great ideas, but you don't have the systems to support it, you can't scale the ideas. The ideas will remain embodied in a very micro space. If you are trying to solve your problems and people are giving you solutions, you will only solve that problem in that moment, and the problem will therefore recur, and you have to go back to, you need a system to be able to sustain and institutionalize these solutions. People will deliver the results, but you sustain the results with a system. And of course, people inspire change, but you want to institutionalize the change so that you can have the sustainability that we're talking about. Again, build capacity, protect that capability. What does all of this lead to? The same things we talked about. Consistency, efficiency, quality, stakeholder confidence, which we see as our key currency in this higher education landscape. And of course, leads to attracting greater financial resilience and sustainability. Next slide, which I believe might be the penultimate slide. Most of us take an incremental budgeting approach, don't it? I am guilty, let me raise my hand. Yeah, most of us, we all do that. So what did it cost last year? Let's put in 5% for inflation this year. And that's how we budget, for the most part, unless a visionary leader is shifting focus and says, we need to gear our efforts towards this. So we typically take this incremental budget approach. I'm suggesting a strategic budgeting approach. How can every single dollar and cent create the greatest long-term institutional value? And that means that your objectives must be clear, your risk must be properly analyzed, risk across all areas. Everybody knows what all the risk verticals are. Your performance, which is how are you using the dollars given to you? Because here's the reality. Every time they give CMU $1 more than you, and CMU doesn't spend that dollar well, all of us feel it. All of us feel it. Because it's one finite set of resources. Every time somebody else gets money for a project that fails, it affects you. So each of us have a responsibility to be clear about the risk and the performance. And of course, future capability. Does it build tomorrow's institution? We are not getting a budget so that we can simply make it through this year. And so the budget has to be thought of in a very continuous way, building for the future. Next slide. Again, shifting our perspective, financial reporting. We're just telling people what happened. We send something to Dr. Benjamin and to Dr. Troop that says, this is what happened. But the financial visibility that we ought to create, and we must be comfortable being transparent in this way, showing how these financial engagements have contributed to what we intended to have as outcomes. Being very clear. And I know sometimes we don't feel like we should justify our existence, but technically that's what it comes down to. Demonstrating our value. Next slide. Leave this with you. This is what it looks like. If you're just engaging in financial reporting, you're telling us where the money went. Of course, you're compliant. And you can submit all of your audited financials as well, Dr. Benjamin, and you can send them over. And everybody can be happy that we're up to date on the reporting. But if you're not taking a financial visibility approach, you're not looking at where the money actually created value. What did it lead to? Something that supports strategic decision making, that informs the future. And of course, the ROI principle must be present in higher education. The ROI element must be present in higher education. And I think this is where I'll end. Next slide. So here we are. We want a kind of stewardship that is going to enable us. Jump to the next slide because my time is up. This is the final slide. So here's what I would encourage you to do in closing. Lead with institutional purpose. Many of us lead with purpose, but that purpose is not clearly aligned and specific enough and targeted enough to the particular institution that we lead. Lead with institutional purpose. Align every single decision with what the institution needs to do. Be a good steward. Steward international institutional capacity. Recognize that the sustainable growth depends on organizational capability and not just your blind ambition to accomplishing something. Be strategic. Make strategic trade-offs. Operate within the frame and what you have available to you. Not telling you to turn water into wine. Not telling you to turn stone into bread. But I'm saying that everything is a trade-off. A focal point this year may not be your focal point next year. Be able to be strategic with that. And finally, build institutional alignment. Ensure that your governance, your budgeting, your academic priorities, and your quality assurance are all in place to be able to rinse and repeat, to do it all over again and to do it well. So in closing, we want more. Let me be clear. But in the absence of more, what are we doing to optimize that which we already have? I contend most of us, if not all of us, can do better in this area. Align ourselves, focus our spending, and ensure that at all times we remain true to the mission. Thank you very much. Just go to the conclusion slide so they can read it, please.